Welcome. We have a couple of people still trickling in, but we're going to go ahead and get the introductions out of the way. My name is Shakira, and this is Corinne, and we're going to be presenting to you on the gluten-free class. I'm the nerdy, non-science science part, and Corinne is the fun brains and cooking part. And we have a couple of students, Angela and Luz, who are going to come up, and they're going to they're going to show you some recipes that they've created with some gluten-free grains. Courtney and Lisa are also part of our team, and they have gathered all these samples for you. So they have done the big part of the work, and we just are the talkers. And Kelly, like I mentioned, is our clinic supervisor, and she kind of oversaw our production of this. So we want to thank you guys for being here today. I know it's taking some time out of your day, and we really appreciate you being here. This class is about you guys, so we want to make sure that we're addressing what you guys want. So we want this to be fun and interactive. We're going to ask some questions. We want you guys to participate. We want you to throw in answers. You don't have to raise your hands. So we're going to get this started, and I want you to know we're going to reward you for answering. So anybody who participates, you will get a prize. We have a prize patrol coming around with prizes for those who raise their hands. So to start off, when we say gluten, what comes to mind for you guys?
Stretchy.
Stretchy. Gluten stretchy. Bread.
Starch.
Dough. Dough.
Let's get these prizes going out. Dough, stretchy, bread, baked.
What about gluten-free?
Prize patrol, prize patrol. Love it. Keep participating. Okay, so what are you guys hoping to get out of this class?
Knowledge.
Learn. Basic understanding, knowledge, learn. Anybody hoping to get a recipe out of this class? Yeah, that's what I come here for.
That's knowledge.
That's knowledge. It is knowledge. A recipe is always knowledge. Well, we're going to get started. You guys are off to a great start on the participation. So, what is gluten? Gluten is a protein matrix, and it's formed from two proteins, gliadin and glutenin. And when those proteins come together and with enough water and mashing them together, think about like kneading a dough, they form gluten. There's a nice little picture. So that's gluten. That's the gluten protein matrix. So we've heard these terms like gluten intolerance, I've got a gluten sensitivity, I've got a gluten allergy, I've got celiac disease, celiac sprue, and those terms are kind of thrown out all over the place, but they're not actually all interchangeable. So I'm here to kind of clarify the difference between a gluten intolerance and celiac disease. Those are kind of the two big ones. A gluten intolerance is a response by your body that is not mediated by the immune system. Whereas celiac disease is a response by your body to gluten that is mediated by your immune system. So when you eat gluten, if you think of my hand, my arm here, as the lining of your intestine, if you eat gluten and it causes some inflammation. We normally have these little finger-like projections that stick up from the intestinal wall, and they float around, they collect nutrients, they're really happy. When you eat gluten and that inflammation comes, those villi, those little fingers get smashed, and they can't really move around very well, they can't absorb nutrients as well either. So that sounds like a pretty bad situation to me. So some of the signs and symptoms of both gluten intolerance and gluten sensitivity, celiac disease are very similar. Abdominal pain, diarrhea. The biggest difference is between gluten intolerance and celiac disease. Celiac disease has more malabsorptive. So like you see more of like the iron deficiency anemia. They can have osteoporosis if it's gone on for a long time because you're not able to absorb the nutrients as well. The symptoms and severity are different just depending on the severity of your disease. The way we test for gluten intolerance is by having somebody do an elimination. So you take all of the gluten-containing foods out of your diet, and 6 weeks, and if your symptoms go away without having that gluten, it was probably gluten that was triggering it. Whereas with celiac disease, since it's an immune-mediated response, we either diagnose it with a blood test, if you've had gluten recently, or with a biopsy of the intestine. So those are some differences there. I know, looking at this list, I'd say I probably have gluten intolerance. So what do we do? For both celiac disease and gluten intolerance, we go on a gluten-free diet. We try to eliminate as much gluten from our diet as possible. But something that happens when we do this is gluten-free foods are not fortified the way that normal wheat-containing foods and gluten-containing foods are. So B vitamins are really important to make sure you either get B vitamins from other foods or from a supplement. Make sure you're eating a wide range of foods so that you're getting the fiber. And one note of caution, especially for those who tend to have like high glucose levels or diabetes, a lot of the gluten foods, like the cookies that we'll be handing out, they can be high in carbs and glucose. So kind of be cautious with those because they can really, especially if you're sensitive to glucose, those can shoot up. So, what foods, this is a question for you guys, prizes are coming out. What foods contain gluten?
Wheat bread.
Wheat bread, yes.
Cake.
Cake,
Rice.
yes.
Rice.
Rice. Rice is actually gluten-free.
It is? I thought it was only brown rice that was gluten-free.
All rice is gluten-free.
Depends on how
I'll go into the details.
She'll go into detail. All rice is gluten-free, depends on the processing.
Bagels.
Bagels. Anybody else? Prizes are involved.
Cosmetics.
Spell that sentence.
Spell.
Sourdough.
Somebody say cosmetics.
Cosmetics.
Oats.
Yeah.
Yes, mascara, shampoos, those can have gluten in them. I don't know how often we're eating the mascara, but that, I mean, they do have it. Something else?
Oats.
Pardon? Medications. Got it. I think you guys covered everything. That medications was the last one.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
If you have gluten in your, say, shampoo, does your body absorb it?
It
Or does it have
depends.
to just...
It depends on the person. Some people experience side effects from having topical gluten on their skin or in their hair, but for the most part, what we're talking about is usually from eating the gluten. So, like the foods.
It's very individualized.
Yeah. So you guys got most of the list. I think you got everything. Oh, sausages and gravies. So, you know, and breading for meats.
What sausages do they?
The fillers.
It's the fillers in the sausage. It's just they put some kind of gluten-containing fillers in there. And gravies, the fillers in the gravies too.
To keep it together so it doesn't break apart.
Yes. You should be teaching this
I-
class. He's an expert. That's great.
The assistant.
Yes.
Secret assistant.
Well, the good news, though, I know you're sitting out here going, oh my gosh, this gal just eliminated all of my favorite foods. But the good news is that there's a lot of grains that don't contain gluten. And Corinne, in just a short while, is going to go over those grains. So, and she's going to tell you how to cook them. She's going to tell you what the good properties of them are. So it's going to be, that's the best part of the class. So before she does that, I want to give you guys a couple pointers on going out to eat, especially if you have a gluten intolerance or celiac disease. I know that when I go out, I normally have it planned ahead of time. I'm not just winging it saying, oh, I'm going to stop here and get something to eat. So plan ahead, because this is, especially if you have celiac disease, plan ahead because you want to be able to know what's on the menu. You can go online, you can look at the menu, you can look for those foods that don't contain gluten, proteins that aren't breaded, that don't have gravies, that don't have sauces. The gluten-free grains that Corinne's going to talk about, quinoa, rice, those are all safe foods. Caution with deep fried foods. A lot of those can have gluten in the breading that they deep fried in. And even if you have something that's deep fried and doesn't have breading, that fryer might have gluten remnants. Same thing when you're going out to eat, you want to make sure that that restaurant, especially if you have celiac disease, follows gluten-free cooking practices when they're making their gluten-free items. You don't want somebody who has just flipped a breaded chicken breast, they use that same spatula to flip your unbreaded grilled chicken breast, because the body's going to can respond to those the gluten remnants on there. Seasonings can often have gluten in them, so that's something else to watch out for. So stuff with lots of seasonings. When we go out to eat, something you ask your server. If you get to the restaurant and you didn't plan ahead, or you planned ahead and they took your safe food off the menu, and you don't want to panic, you can always ask your server. Servers should be fairly knowledgeable about gluten-containing foods at this point. I'm not saying that they all are, but when you when you ask your server about gluten-free options, don't say I have celiac disease, or I have gluten intolerance, or gluten sensitivity, because that's not going to register with them. Just let them know you have an allergy to gluten. Although allergy may not be the best description, for a server, they're going to be like, oh, that person has allergy. Same thing if somebody said, I have an egg allergy, or I have a dairy allergy. They're going to know that that's a pretty serious thing. So make sure to try to use that allergy word when you're talking with people in the restaurant industry. Some places have a gluten-free menu. This is something you can check online. You can call the restaurant ahead of time. And not all places do. Some places might have gluten-free substitutions, like instead of pita and hummus, you can do rice cracker and hummus. Not all places have this, but it's something to check online, or you can call ahead of time to find out if they have gluten-free substitutions. And some places have a menu allergen guide, which is like, there's a picture of it up here, but it's like a picture of an egg next to a recipe, or a picture of looks like a piece of wheat next to a recipe, or a glass of milk, or a carton of milk. The important thing with that is to make sure you look either at the bottom of the menu or the back page to find the legend, because that may mean that that food contains eggs, or it may mean that that food doesn't contain eggs. So make sure that you know the distinction there. Yeah, so just make sure that you're planning ahead, asking the questions, calling the restaurant ahead of time, and making sure that the server knows that you have an intolerance or an allergy. So now that the sciencey, boring part is over, we're going to turn it over to Corinne. She's going to give you the fun grains and the recipes and the good stuff.
So before we go on to all of the gluten-free grains in detail, I wanted to tell you about where you can buy gluten-free grains. So the first thing that came to my mind was bulk sections. Has anybody been to a bulk section at grocery stores? Okay. So this is a great place to get all kinds of different grains, nuts, seeds, whatever you can find. However, if you have celiac disease or a very high response to eating gluten, I would not advise you get your grains from bulk sections, because a lot of the grocery stores don't have these containers designated for that certain grain, so a lot of times they'll be filled with different kinds of grains, and there's just too high a chance for cross-contamination. So I would advise against that for those of you with celiac disease, or if your body's recovering from celiac disease or a high gluten intolerance. So the other option is to buy packaged foods that are gluten-free. I really like this brand, Bob's Red Mill. They do a really good job at telling you that this is a gluten-free product. There's no cross-contamination. And these can be found at Whole Foods, PCC, I'm not sure if Trader Joe's has Bob's Red Mill, but they have their own varieties. They have quinoa at Trader Joe's, they have rice at Trader Joe's. And even those gluten-free grains that I will go into detail about are sold at Costco and Winco sometimes. They're in the bigger packages there, so I would just be worried about using that up quickly. But if you eat a lot of rice, it may be a good option for your family for economy's sake. But also quinoa, if you buy a bigger package, it's really great to keep it in the freezer or fridge to extend the shelf life if you can. So, on to the gluten-free grains. I have them in alphabetical order because my mind works like that. So, starting with amaranth. This is the first gluten-free grain. Has anybody heard of amaranth? Mm-hmm. Yes? Has anybody tried it? Yep. It's a really neat grain to look at. And we have samples up here for you, so you can take a look at those when we're done with the presentation. But amaranth is originally from South America, and it is full of fiber and vitamin C. Who can tell me what vitamin C is good for?
Who said cold?
Immune system.
Very good, yes. So vitamin C is an antioxidant. So that's like a buzzword. Lots of people talk about antioxidants these days, but antioxidants essentially reduce all of the free radicals, or the essentially bad things in your body. So this grain's really great for those recovering from celiac disease. It can be really restorative to your gut and your digestive system because it has that antioxidant in it. And I saw one recipe, I thought this was really interesting. Has anybody ever made popped amaranth? Like popped corn? I saw one recipe online for popped amaranth. And unfortunately we don't have a sample for you today, but I thought that was really neat and it could be a really great snack to do. So if anybody is interested in looking that up, I thought it would.
So you cook it the same way as quinoa?
Yeah, so all of these grains, thank you for reminding me, all of these grains can be cooked like quinoa or rice. So just in a pot with water. I usually like to toast the grains first to bring out the flavor and the aroma of the grain, and then you can just add the appropriate amount of water, and we'll have handouts for you to indicate how much water for how much 1 cup of grain, whatever grain you decide to choose. And they have different cooking times depending on the grain. It really varies, but yes, it can be cooked the same as quinoa. And one other thing about these whole grains is sometimes they have a really tough exterior, and the cooking time can be really long, so it makes it really hard to kind of fit into the day. If it takes 60 minutes to cook a grain, it's like, wow, do I really have the time? But a great tip for that is to soak your grains overnight. So the night before, just add your grain into a big bowl with plenty of water, and then drain it in the morning, and then you go to cook it, and it's reduced the cooking time by half. So, so I find that to be a really good tip. So our next gluten-free grain is buckwheat, and this is a buckwheat field up here. Buckwheat is actually commonly used in Russia, which I didn't know, and it's high in calcium, vitamin E, and B vitamins. Who knows what calcium is good for? Yes, that was a pretty easy one. So kasha actually is buckwheat, and kasha looks kind of like this, except it is the dehulled grain, and then it's roasted. So it has like this more caramel color to it, and it's got a really nutty flavor. It's really, really nice. And we actually have a sample of kasha for you to try today. So that'll be good. Our next gluten-free grain is corn. I'm sure all of you know that corn is gluten-free. And we promote the use of it as polenta when it's dried. I mean, obviously corn on the cob is more like a starchy vegetable. So when the corn kernels are dried, they're ground up, and that's what makes polenta. So polenta is a really, really great alternative for a lot of things. We have a roll of it right here, and actually, I think this is some people might think this is kind of weird, but actually slice it, and then you can make like little mini pizzas out of it. And they're the gluten-free pizza crust, essentially. So that's what I like to do with it. But corn is really high in vitamin A, and vitamin A is great for cell turnover. So when your body's making cells, it needs vitamin A. So once again, if you've had celiac disease in the past, you're trying to rebuild those cilia that Shakira talked about. And vitamin A is going to be really restorative in building those cells back up again. One note of caution that I would suggest is buying corn organic, because a lot of corn on the market these days is genetically modified. So, so if that concerns you, then I would definitely buy organic. All organic corn is not genetically modified. The next gluten-free grain is millet. Has anybody tried millet?
No.
A couple people. Okay. So millet in this country is actually used in a lot of animal feed, which I find kind of shameful because it's a really, really great grain, and it's so wonderful for those who've had celiac disease because it is super easy to digest, and it's actually one of the only alkaline-forming grains in the body. So I don't know if any of you have heard people talk about an acid state versus an alkaline state in your body. A lot of grains are acid-forming, so when you digest them, they make your body more acidic. This grain is actually more alkaline, so that's one of the unique properties to it. It's also high in phosphorus and B vitamins, and it's really easy for the gut to digest. Oats. So this is kind of a controversial one. Who thinks that oats has gluten in it? So yes, it is on our gluten-free list, so it is a gluten-free grain inherently. However, there are problems with cross-contamination. So you want to make sure that any oats that you do buy are gluten-free. Like this one, it says gluten-free on it. So there's certified no cross-contamination in this grain. Yes?
I'm absolutely nuts about steel-cut oats, and Bob's also has gluten-free steel-cut oats.
They do,
They're
they do.
wonderful.
Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, they have all sorts of different varieties, and they're clearly marked that they're gluten-free. So I think that's a great option. So be careful with cross-contamination with oats. Also, oats are high in soluble fiber and protein, and they're obviously everybody thinks of oatmeal for breakfast, and there are a whole bunch of different varieties. Steel-cut oats were mentioned. We have rolled oats here. There are old-fashioned, quick cooking, whole groat oats, and there are just so many different varieties, and it's essentially just a different processing method. So the whole groat is the whole grain, and then I think that is cut with a steel blade, and that's what makes the steel cut oats. And then you can roll the product of the steel cut oat out, and that's rolled oats. So it's just different processing methods, but they're essentially all whole grains. I would recommend steel cut oats because they have higher fiber content, but whatever you can fit into your diet is wonderful. So the next gluten-free grain is quinoa. So this one's rising in popularity. I'm sure lots of people have heard about it. Has anybody tried red quinoa?
Yes.
Red quinoa. It's good stuff, and this is one of the quickest cooking gluten-free oats or gluten-free grains. So that's one reason why I really like it. It cooks up in 15 minutes, and it's really quick.
Is there a difference in nutrient content, the
Red and the
red
white.
and the white?
Yes, definitely. There are different pigments that are in plants, so it's just the different pigment essentially isn't that causes the quinoa to be red compared to the white quinoa, and
So it's got more vitamins than that, or what is more that makes it red?
it's a different just nutrient content. So I'm not sure. I think it's probably anthocyanins. It's the red. So it's just a different plant pigment, and they have different functions in our bodies.
You can also get a black quinoa.
You can get black quinoa, yeah. That's great too. Thanks for pointing that out. So quinoa is super high in protein, which is really restorative for your body, especially if you don't eat a lot of protein. It's a really great way to get protein into your diet. And it's really high in potassium as well. So those with high blood pressure, this might be really helpful to decrease that as well. Moving on, so rice. So your question about rice. Rice is a gluten-free grain. All varieties are gluten-free, even white rice. I would recommend white rice being an option in the diet. Let's see, shorter grain rice has higher digesting starch in it, so your body breaks down the starch more quickly, and it causes a higher rise in your blood glucose. And then longer grain rice takes your body longer to digest, so it's not as high of an impact on your blood sugar as shorter grain rice is. So that's something to keep in mind if you're concerned about blood sugar spikes in your diet. It might be better to get the long grain rice, such as basmati. Before I was researching for this presentation, I didn't know that they actually age basmati rice to get the flavor and the aroma that comes out in basmati. So I thought that was really interesting. Yes.
I learned back when I was researching acid alkaline that wild rice is alkaline as opposed to
Oh, interesting.
the other rices
Interesting.
are.
Yeah, so wild rice is a really, really long grain rice, and it comes in different colors, so it's once again going to have those different nutrient contents that the plant makes, which is great to, more colorful diet, the better, right? So
It's a grass, isn't it?
it is a grass, yes. And it's really high in fiber if you get the whole grain, the brown rice. There are different colors, as you can see here. There's red and brown. And then also white rice, I would recommend that for maybe if you have a picky eater at home and they may not be getting the B vitamins because they're gluten-free. White rice is actually fortified with B vitamins and iron, so that might be a good option for those folks. Sorghum. Not many people have heard about this one. Who's tried sorghum? Anybody? One person? So sorghum we don't actually have a representation of the whole grain today. We just were able to find it in flour, so it's hard to find in whole grain form. But the flour, I've heard, is really wonderful for breading things. It's a really great bread substitute. Lisa?
I just wanted to interject that the bread samples that we have today are sorghum flour based.
Great.
So later when you have a chance to sample, you'll be able to taste it.
Great, yeah. So it's a really, really common substitute in gluten-free products and baking. And then sorghum is also slowly digested. So once again, it's very easy on your gut to digest. So it's a great property of it. So our last gluten-free grain is teff. And this is a really, really neat grain. Who's tried teff? Okay, a good handful of people. So teff is sort of, some people consider it a super grain because it's 5 times richer in calcium, iron, and potassium than any other grain, which is pretty amazing. It's the smallest grain that we have here today, and it's also very high in protein and fiber. It can be cooked like any other grain, and it's typically used in Ethiopian cuisine. So has anybody tried injera? That is made out of teff. And it's just a really, really neat grain to kind of play around with, so I would definitely suggest taking it home and giving it a try. All right, so that's our gluten-free grain list.
We've got some more prizes to give away.
We do.
But you're gonna have to work for it. Pop quiz. It's not a class if there's not a quiz, right?
Yes.
Can anybody name some grains to avoid? Barley, wheat. Where's the prize patrol coming around? Rye.
Perfect. Any others?
Spelt.
Spelled.
And
What about-
genetically modified corn?
Yes, if that is of concern, yes. What about gluten-free products? Can anybody name any gluten-free grains? Whole grains? Teff, yes.
Yes.
We don't have a sample of teff. Amaranth?
Oh, she's got hidden
Who
samples.
said teff?
I did.
Okay.
You get a sample of teff.
So what else?
Thank you.
Buckwheat.
Buckwheat, yes. What else?
Millet.
Buckwheat. Who said millet? Who said? We don't have a thing of sorghum. We can give you a box if you want. What else? What we will have some handouts for you on that if you want to give those out. Anybody else have anything? Corn? You said corn. Sorry, you heard amaranth. Who said sorghum?
What about this guy? Oh, who said it first? Who doesn't have a prize?
Amaranth.
Fantastic.
Good. I think you guys pretty much got all of them.
Oh, farro, right.
Farro, yes. We have a couple of recipes that were prepared for you by Luz and Angela. So they're going to come up and they're going to get ready. And Angela's going to actually make something for you. She's going to demo. That's how easy it is. But we just wanted to have a quick mention before they do the demo for you that if you have any further questions, you want to talk to somebody about more about going on a gluten-free diet, we have coupons. You can come see any of us at the Bastyr Clinic. You can also schedule an appointment if you're more interested in doing the testing for celiac disease. Our NDs do the blood test for that, so you can also schedule an appointment with one of our NDs. Go ahead, Luz. She's got a lovely grain for you.
Good morning. Angela and I prepared 2 dishes for you today. One is with buckwheat, toasted buckwheat, and old kasha, and she made one with quinoa. So I'm going to show you just so you can have an idea of the texture of what we prepare. This is with mushrooms and potatoes.
Yum.
And I don't know if you can feel the smell. It smells really nice. So it's very easy to make, and we have a copy of the recipe for you in the handout. It's the first one in the handout. And there are some tips when you make the recipe, and I'm gonna go over that. First, you start with some olive oil and some onions, and that's the key to this recipe. You have to caramelize the onions about 10 to 15 minutes, and after that, you just add the kasha and stir it, and then the boiling water, and that's it. It's that simple. Okay. So the key here is not to stir the grains, and this is for any whole grain. If you have a very good tight lid and low heat, you don't have to stir it. And what else? And then you just leave it there for 15 minutes until all the water has been absorbed by the grain. And you can know by just tipping the pan and look if there's any water remaining. And then you remove the lid after the 15 minutes, leave it there, fluff it, and should be ready to eat. That's it. Now, Angela's gonna show you how to make the quinoa salad.
So, in the recipes on the second page, so just the back side of the first page, it's the quick lemon and garlic quinoa salad. And I will walk through how to make it. So I've already prepared my quinoa here. It's just a half a teaspoon of sea salt, a cup and 3/4 of water, and then your quinoa that's been rinsed and drained. And you just bring it up to a boil, and then cover and simmer it for 15 minutes. And like Lou said, just tip the pan just to make sure that all the water's out. And once that's done, you can just take the cover off and then put it to the burner that's not hot, and just let it sit there for about 10 minutes just to finish up and cool down a little bit. So while that's cooking, you can chop up about a half a cup of carrots, and then also mince a 1/4 of a cup, or I think it's a 1/3 of a cup of parsley. And then once that's done, you can set those aside, and I just made the dressing. So the dressing is already prepared here, but it's just a 1/4 of a cup of olive oil and a 1/4 of a cup of lemon juice. And then I did 4 cloves of garlic that I minced up in there, and then 2 tablespoons of tamari, which is essentially a gluten-free soy sauce. And so once that's done and your quinoa has cooled off a little bit, about 10 minutes, all you need to do is just combine all the ingredients. I also have some sunflower seeds here, about a 1/4 a cup of sunflower seeds. So you just put your quinoa in the bowl. You can add all of your ingredients, so the parsley in there, and your carrots, and then your sunflower seeds, and add the dressing on top. And then you just mix it together. You just take 2 forks or any sort of utensils and just mix it all up and get all the dressing in there. And it's done. And it takes about 15 to 20 minutes.
Sometimes you can put currants in there too.
Yeah, you can add anything in here you like, dried fruit or a different kind of seed or nuts or different vegetables. And that is it. So we're gonna have samples for you too of both of my recipe and her recipe. We'll probably set it up in the back there. But now we just kind of want to transition and leave any questions that you guys have. We can answer any questions. Yeah?
With the quinoa, I've always read you're supposed to rinse it first, but I have never done that. What is that for? I've read the reasons why, because there's like a tough shell, but I've never done it, and mine always
Some people think that there's some people are bothered by a little bit of a bitter coating on the outside of the grain. It's called saponin, I think somebody said it.
Right.
And some people aren't bothered by it at all. So those that are really sensitive to bitter tastes may not like the grain because of that, and they may find it more appealing if it's been washed first. But it's not absolutely necessary. Some people think it cooks better if you rinse it first, and it really just depends on who you talk to, I find.
And you can look at the package of the quinoa. Some will say rinse ahead of time, and some will just tell you how to cook it, put it in the water. And that's because since quinoa is becoming so popular, I mean, they sell it at Costco. You know it's popular if it's at Costco, right? They're pre-rinsing it. So sometimes, most of the time now, I mean, like in the big bags, it's already pre-rinsed. So, I mean, I used to soak mine or rinse it, and I don't. I just throw it in. Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yes.
Can you remind us of vitamin B sources besides supplements?
vitamin B.
Yeah, because you recommended making sure we get enough vitamin B, but
Right, absolutely, and that's why we wanted to highlight the whole grains, because whole grains have plenty of B vitamins in them inherently. So as long as you have enough whole grains in your diet, you should be getting plenty of B vitamins. But if you're concerned about your B vitamin intake, we can definitely see you here at the clinic, and you know, do an assessment of your daily intake, and really make sure that you're getting all of the sources that you need. But as long as you have a varied diet and plenty of whole grains, you're getting all the B vitamins that you probably need.
A controversial question, excuse me. A lot of people have heard of Dr. Mercola, and he absolutely thinks you should never have any grains. And I don't pay attention to that because I think if you cut so many things out of your diet, then you're suffering nutritionally. But where did that idea come from?
I'm not sure.
Kelly? Can we divert?
There are different schools of thought.
The no-grain diet, I can imagine eating.
Yeah, part of that is the Paleolithic diet is actually a no-grain diet, and that's rising in popularity for a bunch of different reasons. Some people may think it's restorative for diabetes, if somebody has diabetes and they don't have any way of breaking down the starch that they're eating. Some people say it might be helpful for that. Other people use the Paleolithic diet for weight loss purposes. I mean, it's kind of across the board, but it really just depends on who you talk to. I believe in eating whole foods as they are, and whole grains are part of the whole foods kind of spectrum. So that's personally what we've been taught here, and if there's no reason to cut out grains from your diet, especially if there are gluten-free varieties, then we just want to promote as many options as you all can eat. I don't know, does anybody have anything else to add?
Well, when he talks about that, he's talking about millions of years ago, and we've obviously evolved and incorporated these foods into our diet. And the only thing I've done to make an adjustment is I'm diabetic, and I was surprised at how many carbohydrates there are in a half a cup of rice. I mean, I think they recommend a quarter or a third of a cup as a serving, but I'm not going to not eat rice. I love rice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we definitely want to promote eating whole foods, as I said, and enjoying what you're eating as well. I mean, that's part of the whole eating experience, is being able to smell the garlic and being able to enjoy the roasted kasha, and that whole experience of it, we really want to promote. So if you enjoy eating rice and get lots of pleasure from it, then absolutely we don't want to cut that out. But there are those different schools of thought out there, as I said,
It seems extreme, though.
Yeah, some may think it's extreme, and then others that have tried it, may absolutely swear by it. So it's really just a personal, I think, independent choice. Sure. Absolutely.
And in terms of rice, it's always better to choose the brown rice over the white rice.
We do.
If you can.
Yes. Yeah.
So we can, if you want, you guys can get up and try these samples that we've made for you, and go around, and we're happy to answer questions.
I think we had one more question. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I wondered, has glucose intolerance been around on such a wide scale for very long? I mean, it seems like 20 years ago that wasn't a term you would ever hear, And now it seems like there are bakeries, and it's just like everywhere, So it's like, it seems, so.
I think it's definitely becoming more recognized. I mean, people have had it, had symptoms of it or whatnot for quite some time, but it's definitely becoming more recognized, and more people are being diagnosed. And the increase in diagnosis is due to increased knowledge about it, we know about the interaction of the gliadin, the protein component of gluten that actually causes the inflammation for the celiac disease, and the increased diagnosis. So it's hard to say which, if it's more prevalent now because we're eating more grains, or if we have better testing tools.
I read an article in a fairly reputable magazine, I don't know if it was Spirituality and Health or Ode, but they said that they're theorizing that the hybridization of our wheat over 50 or 100 years has affected it, so that it's changed its chemistry, and that's the reason why we're having sensitivity.
Yeah, I mean, and I've read a lot of similar things, and these are definitely plausible hypotheses and explanation. We can't pinpoint the one reason, But yeah, I mean, that could be it. It could be like just the compilation of the grains we are eating and what we're eating them with. There's no, it's hard to pinpoint the exact reason why we're seeing more, this is more and more common.
And some people think that celiac is more of an autoimmune-based disease, and in general, autoimmune diseases are rising in incidence in our population. So especially some people maybe think that there's a link with vitamin D, and since we live so far away from the equator here, that maybe that's part of it, the autoimmune sort of idea. I mean, there's just a lot of speculation out there, and it's hard to say really what is pointing to all of this, but there's definitely increased incidence.
Yes.
Did you go into baking? I got here 2 minutes. Like, did you go into baking at all, or no? I see you have a lot of baking products.
If I could just give you a little idea of what we have for you to sample today, we can transition and then answer questions informally if you'd like, because we'll be around. But I wanted to acknowledge the sponsors who provided food samples, some of whom are local companies. We have Wheatless in Seattle has donated some fresh baked sorghum-based bread without rice, without other grains, and it's a whole grain, and some muffins as well. And we have order forms on the table. They have changed their delivery, their service operation to a pre-order basis, and you can pick up. It's a bakery in North Seattle, so there's information on them. We also have 2 local producers, Janice's Jammers, who makes a Whole Foods-based energy bar, as well as Sky Daughter Cookies, a woman in North Seattle who produces gluten-free cookies out of a small bakery operation. And we sell these products in the Bastyr dispensary. There's a table in the dispensary today, so after the class you can go in and see what they've set up, where they have cookbooks as well as some sample products. We also have little samples of Caveman Bar and then Bumble Bar, which is a company whose bars we sell in the dispensary as well. And at the end of the table are some samples of gluten-free supplements. So any of you who are taking supplements currently or want to come in and have a consultation with one of our naturopathic physicians or the nutrition clinic, you can see what's available in the dispensary, and these are all gluten-free samples, multivitamins, protein powders, etc. So I just wanted you to know that that's available for you to try today, and then you can talk with the dispensary staff, some of whom are experts on gluten-free eating. They can give you more information as well.
We'll talk to you about it. Do you want to mention the baking?
Yeah, well, I was just going to conclude with all of you are happy, you're welcome to roam around, and we can answer questions if you have more individual questions. We're happy to address those. The only thing I have to add for baking is I'll write up a little conversion equation that you can use for 1 cup of any flour in any recipe. I have 1 cup of gluten-free alternative, and I can just write that up on the board for you if you like, and anybody else, you're welcome to copy that down. We found it to be pretty successful. So yeah, thank you all for coming so much. We're glad that we could